For some reason, many Christians like to say that God is the first artist. They continue that humans, as his creation and his servants, are emulating him in his original artistry. By Christian standards, he is our father, and after all, children just copy their parents. This simple statement of poor theology leads to a common trope in Christian communities which manifests in statements like this: "My family is the most potent art I will ever be a part of creating." S.D. Smith on the Makers and Mystics podcast. Or even worse, it leads to the kinds of broad statements that Makoto Fujimura makes in his book Art and Faith. By connecting art to making, I am intentionally broadening the word art to every human being's act of making. I can't stand these ideas. God is not an artist. Your family is not an artwork. And that is good. Here's why. These ideas all stem from an overly broad idea of what art making is, and it leads to a breakdown of useful and important categories. Categories that help us understand the proper course of action regarding the realms of art making in the studio, family and the home, or theology in the church. At its core, these sorts of statements lionize art making far beyond its proper place, cheapen the value of family, and degrade God. How does it lionize art? Any clear-thinking thinker will see that we have an immediate problem. My argument relies upon how I define art, which is why I start here in my reasoning. Fujimura offered a very broad definition of art: every human being's act of making. In his whole book, he does not ever clarify with any more detail. I don't think he actually thinks this. I think he needs a better editor. It may seem odd to hear me say this, as I constantly talk about how I like a broad definition of art, but I mean that I like a specific broad definition. One area in which I embrace a broad definition is in what an artwork can be about. That is, the subject matter, or the ultimate context or meaning that the artwork contains. Art can be about comedy, tragedy, life, love, hate, pain, abuse, identity, color, sky, heaven, hell, dragons, unicorns, and even pooping. Art can be about anything. I also think art can be made of anything: stone, paint, plaster, chocolate, light, air, ideas, stories, music, sounds, and whatever NFTs are made of, code or blockchains or gobbledygook. So what is wrong with saying that art is any act of human making? If this is true, then I have to wonder, is what my digestive tract does to food that I eat akin to what I'm doing to paper and ink in the studio? Is the act that the Russians and Ukrainians are involved in, that is, making war, an act of art? You could view it that way. I'm not sure that is that helpful, though. If everything is art, then nothing is art. Or let me be specific. If everything I make is art, then nothing I make is art. I need a different measure if I want to distinguish what I do in the studio from what I do in the bathroom. Or if I want to think about my studio practice as a battle, I'm not sure I want to confuse it with what is happening in Ukraine. This line of thinking blows out the walls that a definition sets up, and what we are left with is basically nothing of use. Before I move on, I do not want to say that I'm not denying that there are similarities between art making and these realms, whether we are talking about a creator who made the universe, or a family, or a war. But we don't want to run the risk of conflating them. That would be falling into a logical error called a false equivalency. This happens all the time and can usually be easily fixed. Take Ellen Lupton's book, Design is Storytelling. No, it's not. Even in her preface, she notes how Stefan Sagmeister criticized the title, but she doubles down on her position. There are lots of commonalities between the two. Yes, there are. So it should be titled Design is Like Storytelling. Her book is great, but she does not convince me that when I am designing a workbench for my studio, I'm telling a story. Rather, she convinces me that through designing my workbench, I'm engaging in an act that has many similarities to storytelling. There are parts of art making that are like a lot of other forms of making. In the studio, we have to battle bad ideas, just like in war. In the studio, we have to digest things and extract nourishment, just like my digestive tract. In the studio, even excrement can have some degree of meaning, but we should not conflate the two. This is an unhelpful lionization of art making. So how does it cheapen family? I think S.D. Smith is also conflating art making with other realms in which humans derive meaning. I think he is doing the same thing as Fujimura. After all, he says, all the things that we artists want, connection, endurance, things that matter, we find all those things in our families. One note, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and guess that he is not denying that some families can be abusive. I'm certain that this is not what he means. He means if we view our family as a work of art, then we can start to intentionally shape our experience of family like a potter shapes clay. This may actually be true, but I still think it cheapens family. Smith is noticing the similarities, but then claims those things as equivalents. That is like saying that weather is the same as climate. Weather has wind and rain and temperature variations, but that does not make it the same thing as what we mean when we talk about climate. Climate does contain those things, but it is much more. Yes, you can shape your family. You can find meaning in your family. You can build your endurance, and raising a family certainly takes sacrifice and patience. But think about this. If you neglect your studio for a while, if you take a break, or if you place your artwork bare for the public to see, there's nothing wrong with that. If you are a father and you neglect your family, or if you decide to take a break from them for a month, or if you post every waking moment on YouTube, then you are doing something wrong. Family can be seen as art in some ways, but ultimately, it is so much more. This actually leads me to a bone I have to pick with art academia. Art schools teach students that the most important thing they have to offer the world is their art. That is not true for the vast majority of artists. And for the ones that it is true, it usually turns out quite poorly. If I were to die today, some of my collectors might be sad, but the majority would probably start looking at the prices of my work on the secondary market. On the other hand, I know several of my students and my family would mourn my death. Those relationships are ultimately more important, and I'm proud of that. I think this conflation of family and art might stem from this same lie. As artists, we have talents, and we better not waste them. Often, art school tells us we should sacrifice our families on the altars of our studio doors. No, we shouldn't. Look at what it did to Pollock. Does anyone at a Chelsea art opening seem happy? Don't buy the lie that your artwork is the pinnacle of your existence. Your family is way, way, way more important than your art. So how does it degrade God? What are artists really doing? We're basically oscillating back and forth between observing the world and rearranging the world. We're looking for something, namely, new meaning. We're looking for new and novel ways that the same old materials that have been on this planet for millions of years can reveal new and meaningful aspects of our reality. What a contrived thing. Literally, it is contrived. We are artificially rearranging material until we, and hopefully others, are able to see that the same material is more than the sum of its parts. This is not the only way material can become meaningful, by the way. That would be another false equivalency. For example, as I've used before, Gettysburg is meaningful because of what actually happened there, not because some artist wrote a fictional story about it, or pushed some mounds into a hill, or brought a cannon and said, hey, doesn't this look like a battlefield? If we claim all meaningful things as art, then we also run into an issue when we speak of the author of fiction versus the author of a biography. It makes sense to compliment the novelists on their imagination and the way in which they wove the threads of the narrative. It would be absurd to say the same of a historian or a biographer. Obviously, they must decide how to frame the story, but what they are doing is tracking a story that actually happened. That is not the same sort of imaginative act, even though both the novel and the memoir can be packed with meaning. So how is art making different from what a religion like Christianity claims? God doesn't make or create out of the materials that is lying around. He creates ex nihilo, that is, out of nothing, or out of pure potential. God's creation is the material that we as artists rearrange. Artists are merely finding the meaning that God planted the seeds of. Historians are recording the manner in which creation has grown. We find meaning. God creates meaning and every potential for meaning. To call him an artist instead of a creator or the creator is to cheapen his grandeur. It is to falsely raise our simplistic creations well above where they should be, pale imitations of an infinite God. Why do these category distinctions matter? I'm not a fan of definitions of art that blur categories and confuse distinctions. Call me a modernist in that regard. Hopefully you can see that I'm trying to pragmatically find a middle ground. I like that postmodern art has challenged the borders of art. I like that Enlightenment thinking has revealed the depths that only extreme specialists could have found. But the categories and definitions we use need to be clear. Otherwise, if we say something, it will seem to be filled with substance, but it will actually just be airy nothing. Take one more example. I'm not a fan of a definition of the word art that is basically the pinnacle of a particular realm of human endeavor. I'm thinking of folks like Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu famously wrote The Art of War. In this manner, an art form is defined as a particular realm of human endeavor. Sun Tzu explores how one becomes a master of war. This definition is not that useful to me today. I know there are ways to master every realm of human endeavor. I don't really need to use the word art for that. In this day and age, most artists talk about that as craft or skill. The masterpiece is an example, the work produced by an artist at the pinnacle of their skill. I want art to be a different kind of word, a different kind of category. Not that that category of masterpiece isn't important, but it's not that important to me, and it's not that important to the art world today. My current definition is this: a work of art is material made artificially meaningful. Perhaps my argument only stands if you agree with my definition. The folks I quoted above are using very odd and, in my opinion, unhelpful definitions. My definition is both broad and definitive. It allows for distinctions between artifact and artwork. It allows for works of poor quality and high quality. It focuses on what I find most valuable in a work of art, what it means. Do I love the masterpiece? Yes, of course. But poorly written books can often carry just as much, if not more, meaning. Harry Potter is a great example. J.K. Rowling did not write the most well-crafted story, and she uses way too many adverbs. Still, it is meaningful. It's a long rumination on good and evil, growing up, our place in the world, how each individual matters, how we should always choose good, how the greatest love in the world is to give one's life for another. Rowling took words and rearranged them over and over until other people could notice that they held meaning. She took the material of words and artificially made them meaningful. That is what art is. You will find those same truths, the truths I found in Harry Potter, in your family, I hope. You will find them in whatever you call God. But hopefully, you will not find it in those places by artifice, but by actuality. Art is merely the signpost. The other things are the real thing. Art can help us notice the real thing better, but no matter how well you paint a family portrait, you would be wrong to confuse the painting for your family, or the other way round. So stop calling God an artist. It's insulting. Don't treat your family like an artwork. Treat them like the most important thing you have. Art is its own thing. Thinking about how other things are similar certainly is fruitful, but don't equate the two just because you notice a few similarities.